Hey guys, it's Kat and I'm back today with my 1 month 1 palette video for September. In this month I used the Naked palette and I thought this was a good pick for the month because it had been discontinued. It was on sale for 50% off. A lot of people bought it, so I thought this might be a good time to pay my respects to a palette that has been discontinued, but also kind of give my thoughts on something that a lot of people might have recently purchased. So if you're not familiar with this series, what I do is over a whole month, I sort of use one palette predominantly, and I then let you know how I went with using that palette, what I thought the positives were, what the cons were, what I struggled with, what I liked about it, and also showing you looks using all the shades. So the two sort of requirements for this series is that I use every single shade in the palette and that I use this palette predominantly, so probably 3 to 4 times a week. I can wear it with other shades or palettes if I wanted to, or stick to the one palette. Doesn't matter as long as I'm wearing the shades and incorporating them in a lot of my looks. So that's the requirements for this series, and I did it. And also at the end, I recreate one of my favorite looks, which is what I'm wearing today. It's very, very nude. I thought it's kind of, it works well for this, naked theme. And it is actually just a one eyeshadow look. So if you want to see that right at the end, should be short and sweet because it's one eyeshadow. Okay, before I start, I do want to point out that this is a palette from a different time. That sounds really weird, but I remember when this first came out and it was around the time where shimmery brow bone highlights were a thing. Not many people used a lot of mattes. Mattes were sort of like, you might use them in the crease, but the whole, full matte eyelid looks and matte colors and all that kind of stuff, it wasn't popular. This was a time where really frosty eyeshadows were really popular. People would put the nude color on the waterline, and most palettes were either all shimmer or like all shimmer with 1 or 2 mattes, and that's exactly what this is. So this is a bit dated right now with how people wear makeup and what preferences people like. A lot of people like a 50-50 split with mattes. That's what I personally like, split with mattes and shimmers. And a lot of people like more mattes and just like 1 or 2 shimmers. So, the times have changed and preferences have changed a lot, but this is very representative of about 10 years ago when most people sort of used these kind of colors and would delve into these sort of when they were going out or wanting like a smoky look. So I completely understand why this is no longer popular today, but I still think the quality of it overall is very nice. This was super easy to use, and the looks that I will run through, they're all nude looks because it's a nude palette. There are some pops in here that you can sort of amplify it, and I did do that a little bit. But overall, I had a really good time with this palette. Most of the shades are very, very easy to use. I am actually what I usually do is go through every single shade and then tell you what I think about that particular shade. But I think what I might do in this video, since there are so many sort of similar shades or they work in a similar way, I think I might actually just categorize them and talk about them sort of in groups. So the first shade I'm going to say is probably my least favorite. This is Virgin, and what Virgin is, it's like an off-white, but it's not very, very shimmery. It's like a satin, so it gives a kind of reflect, so you can definitely see the sheen here, but sort of blended out, it looks more like, I don't know, more of a satin. That actually looks very beautiful as a highlighter just on my hand. Too bad on my face, it doesn't look the greatest. So does Sin. Sin is a little bit more shimmery. It's more of a soft pink rather than an off-white. And this, once again, is very, very smooth, and they sort of look very similar. Now, I did try to use these as an inner corner highlight. To me, on my eyes, it looks a little bit powdery, and I don't like these sort of really frosty looks on me. I did use this one here, Sin, all over the lids, and you can see it in this photo. It was a bad makeup day. For me, these really, really frosty light shades don't work with my coloring, don't work with my, just eye shape, everything. So for me, I didn't like these shades, but I do know that the quality is quite nice and a lot of people would like them if you like these shades. Also with Virgin, I tried to use this on my brow bone highlight at one point, and also the inner corner, because I know that that is sort of when this palette came out, it was very popular to have those kind of frosty shades on your brow bone highlight. Hopefully you can see on the screen, you know, it does work. I don't really like the coloring you can see compared to highlighters that I like to use on my face. I generally like a warmer highlighter, and it didn't make sense to have a warm highlighter on my face and then a frosty one on my brow bone. It looked really unnatural to me. It looked a bit dated, and it's just not my personal preference. But the shades do work well. They just weren't really for me. So for me, I would not reach for these two shades, but that's, once again, personal preference. The quality was fine. I do think the sort of colors of them are too similar. So, you know, when you blend them out, they're like one's more shiny and one's more satin, but they are very, very similar. I don't think you need two. I think if they were to update this palette and make it more modern, that would have to turn into a matte for sure. Then we're getting into the ones that I actually do quite like and I quite enjoyed using. The two mattes. So we have Naked and Buck. These are very similar mattes. So just, they're both sort of like cork browns. One is lighter, one is deeper. So I use pretty much both of these on a daily basis. If I was just doing a quick look like this, I would just use a light one to maybe blend it out or to put something in the crease. And they're not super, super pigmented. As you can see, they're quite nice actually. But they just blend well and you can build them up if you need to. They're not problematic whatsoever. They worked well with the colors in this palette. I would have liked to have seen a deeper matte somewhere up here to really sort of help vamp up a look a little bit, but as they were super practical and I used them both regularly. When I do have mattes in a palette, I do tend to like trying an all matte look, and I did use an all matte look with these two shades. I used the lighter one all over the lid and the deeper one to sort of just deepen the crease, and they worked well. Like, it's a pretty boring look. I don't think it's something that flatters my eyes too much, but they were nice to apply. They applied smoothly. They weren't super, super pigmented, but you could build them up. They were even to apply, and I think that's often more important than pigmentation, whether something applies on the eye smoothly, and these did. All right, so like I said, I'm sort of talking about these in groups, and there were 3 shades that I really personally loved. So Sidecar, I surprisingly liked. I thought originally, I remember when I think I last sort of gave this palette a go, I'm like, that's sort of like weird. It's like a shimmer with chunks of glitter. What the fuck? But I think these days, I like a sort of subtle glitter. I think they're really pretty. They, especially if I use them like I'm wearing an eyeshadow today, where I just sort of put it all over the lid, blend it out, and it kind of really makes the eyes sparkle. And I think if it's not too chunky glitter and fall out everywhere, you can have a really beautiful daily glitter look. And I think Sidecar is it. I think I've only got one photo where I'm wearing this sort of all over the lid on a really low makeup day. But I loved this shade and I wore it a lot. I was very surprised at how much I liked this. Let's swatch it. So it's more of just a nice, I don't know, typical nude. There's nothing super special about it. It's sort of neutral. It's not super warm. It's not super pink. It's just more of your basic nude. So let's sort of swatch that one. You can see that it applies really nicely. It's got more of a nude sort of tan base, and then it's got a very highly reflective sort of shimmer. So there you can see it a bit closer up. And for me personally, that is the lightest I'm sort of happy to go without it looking unflattering on my skin. So this is one I reached for very, very often. I really liked this shade. The next shade that I'm actually wearing today that I thought was really surprising for me, I didn't expect to like it as much as I did, but it is Toasted. So this is sort of like a pink, deeper version of a nude. It's got no glitter in it, so it is just a shimmer. And I didn't realize, because when I first used this palette, I used the gold a lot. I never actually realized this sort of deep pinky nude shade is as beautiful as it is, but I loved this shade. So I will show it to you on the hand. So it is a little bit deeper in the base color. It does have a nice sheen, not as shimmery as this one. So this one's got a bit of, you know, sparkle in it, but it is beautiful. I found this to be a beautiful shade. I'm wearing it on my eyes today. I'm wearing no mattes. I'm just wearing this shade alone. And that's sort of how I like to use it and how I like to use both these shades. I thought they just applied really easily and they were very quick, nice, simple, but effective nude eye look. And sort of when you think of a naked palette, you want it to have shades that actually look very everyday wearable, not much hassle, not much effort, and that's exactly what these were. With those two shades as well, you'll see on the screen when I used Sidecar, which is that lighter one with the glitter, I used that with a wing liner and a deeper shade, so it made it a little bit more bold, but you can see that it is a beautiful nude look and it can be worn just subtly on its own, or you can sort of build it up and wear it with, you know, winged liner and a deeper color to make it look a little bit more intense. And I thought it was a beautiful look. I also did the same thing with Toasted. It looks really flattering when you wear it with liner and a bit more depth to it, but it also looks really gorgeous just on its own. And I do have a couple of photos on the screen where I'm wearing Toasted just on its own. Like I actually used it the majority of the time. I think this was the shade I reached for pretty much every day. But you can see that if you don't put it with a base, you can apply it a lot softer and it looks a lot lighter and less metallic. Or you can sort of pack it on with a base and it looks a lot more intense. So this is one of those versatile shades where if you just put it on with like a fluffy brush, or, you know, put it on without a base, or, you know, a set base and just wash a little bit on, you can get a different effect to packing it on. Like, it is quite a versatile shade. The last shade that I sort of like to use all over the lid and that I have used sort of just on its own with just blending it out with a matte is actually Smog. This is a beautiful sort of deeper bronzy color, and it, you know, has that same sort of effect. If you want something a little bit more warm tone, so it's got more gold in it and it's a little bit more so yeah, if you want something a little bit warmer and something a little bit more brown rather than pink and true nude, I found that that one works really well on its own as well. So hopefully there'll be a photo on the screen where I sort of just put this all over the lid, blended it out with a matte. And these were sort of my three most used all over the lid shades. I thought they were beautiful. They were nice when you sort of built them up and made them more of an intense look, and they were also really nice just on their own. One shade that also has that potential, but I didn't like using it all on its own because it's not really similar to Virgin and Sin down here. I found Half Baked didn't suit my eye coloring, but it has the same potential as Sidecar, as Smog, and as Toasted. It's a beautiful sort of gold. You can see it here. It's like a bright gold. And I mainly use this when I was wearing more bold looks, so with winged liner, with other shades in the palette, or sometimes when I was wearing some like the brown shade, I would use this as an inner corner highlight because it is a beautiful gold and it does make a really beautiful reflection. And I also use this a lot, which I'll show you later with some of the deeper, cooler shades, because I found that it sort of warmed it up and gave it a little bit more life. But on its own, I wouldn't wear this as a one, like I could wear it all over the lid as just a one color look, but I don't really like bright golds in that way personally. Okay, then the rest of the shades, which there's not too many, we have Dark Horse, which I tried to use all over the lid. Hopefully you can see it looked very muddy and it sort of went very, I don't know, it kind of ended up looking a bit, not smoky, that's a wrong word, but it almost looked blackened and it didn't have a nice reflection. So you could pack this on and make it more of an intense look, but if you wanted to pare this down a little bit and wear it all over the lid and sort of apply it a bit more subtly, it loses all the dimension to it. It kind of looks a bit smoky and like, kind of looks a little bit dirty. I didn't really like Dark Horse on its own. Hustle was the same. I tried this on its own. It just looked messy. It looked a little bit, yeah, I just didn't like it. So that's more of a purple tone version, but the nuances in the shades, you can't really see them unless you pack it on. And then also Creep and Gunmetal were shades that, you know, they're all right shades, but I just don't like these shades on a daily basis. They're not for me, and I don't find them at all sort of appropriate for a naked palette. These aren't naked. These are really bold shades that I don't know why they put two of them in here. So you can see this is Dark Horse and Hustle, so sort of like the brown and the purple. So they look very similar because they both have that sort of blackened base to it, which I don't really get. So that is I don't even know which one that is. They look the same. Okay, so there we go. We've got the brown one and we've got the purple one, but you can see how they sort of look dirty. And if you try to blend them out, they just look sort of, I don't know, not very nice. They sort of look, I don't like them. I think these are much better for deepening the outer corner of looks, taking some of these other nude shades and just smoking them up a little bit. That's how I sort of use these. So I will put up a photo where I sort of used Dark Horse to deepen up Smog and Half Baked, because I think that sort of trio works well. You've got some brightness, you have sort of more of a bronze color and then a color to sort of deepen it. And then also I'll put a photo where I used Hustle, where I used it to deepen up Toasted, because once again, those sort of colors work well together. But I think I don't like Hustle or Dark Horse on their own. I don't think they hold their own very well as shades. So like I said, the last two shades being Creep and Gunmetal weren't my favorites. I really only used these because that's part of the challenge. So this one is Creep, which is sort of like, oh, it does not really apply well, does it? It's sort of, so this one here is sort of like a matte with some glitter in it, and it just doesn't really apply very well. That's it built up. Once again, that is pretty much only used to deepen a look, and it does work to deepen a look, but on its own, it's a pretty shitty shade. And this is Gunmetal, which is actually a really nice shade. I think it actually performs quite well on its own. I did pair this with a gold because Half Baked, because I feel like this for me is too cool toned, too blue. So I feel like the only way I sort of can comfortably wear that is to pair it with something warmer to sort of neutralize it. But on its own, you can see it actually is quite a nice shade. And if you like these types of shades, that one's not too bad. And then you can sort of deepen it with this one if you wanted to. I don't like those looks all over the eye, so I didn't, but that's an option for you. So overall, I enjoyed my time using this palette. It was pretty easy to use. There were some sort of struggle shades in here that weren't personally for me, and they were the ones sort of at both ends. I am much more comfortable using sort of that middle section, and if I do want to go deeper, I want them to be mattes, and these weren't. So, you know, this is a dated palette, and I keep that in mind when I'm talking about it, but at the same time, does this suit what I want on a daily basis? And some of it does, some of it doesn't. Pretty much from that matte through to maybe this shade here, I really like that section. The rest of it, I don't need it. So when it comes to the formula, I think definitely the ones I liked the most were the sort of like highly metallic ones. I think they were quite nice. They're not even highly metallic. They're just more bold with the shimmer. I think they were really nice because you can put them on subtly for a more subtle look or pack them on for a bolder look. I also quite liked the mattes. They were easy to use, not too pigmented, but easy to blend, easy to use. And the ones I didn't really like were these sort of smokier ones because I just found that they looked a little bit dull when you blend them out, and they all sort of look very similar. They give the same effect. So slightly sort of warmer, slightly more purple, slightly cooler, but they all sort of just deepen the look a little bit. So I do think there were a lot of redundant shades in here, but my experience of using it was fine. The looks I created, I liked. There was nothing really in there that I was like, that is a really badly performing shade and I really hate it. If I did have any experiences like that, it was more like I shouldn't be wearing this all over the lid because I know it doesn't suit me. I probably shouldn't be wearing this all over the lid because I know that it's not going to really suit me. But they still had their sort of place in the palette, and they can work in different ways. So they're not all fail of shades by any means. They all had their place. I just didn't like them all equally. Now, I don't often at the end of these videos say what I think should be fixed in this palette. I do in some, but if I wanted to modernize this, I think the best way to do it would be to take out some of the shades that don't really make sense in a naked palette. and then some of the sort of redundant shades, like the ones that give the same effect on the eye, and replace a lot of them with mattes. So for example, if this cream was a matte, if this dark brown was a matte, if some of these, instead of being some weird shimmer shades that, I don't know, if that was like a nice taupey matte, and then we had some more deeper, like a dark chocolate brown and a dark sort of plum matte, I think this palette would be a lot more cohesive. And I found that the only ways I really like to use the dark shades were to deepen a look, and it is more effective to deepen a look with a matte, in my opinion, than it is with a shimmer. So I found that, you know, this was very wearable, but to modernize it, they could do a lot more to play with different undertones and add in more mattes to, yeah, make it a little bit more versatile. But I did enjoy my time using this palette. And even though it is sort of dated in the way it's laid out and the colors they showed, you know, I can see why it was such a popular palette back in the day, because it works. All right, guys, I thought that it's most appropriate using a naked palette, or using the original Naked Palette by Urban Decay, to recreate one of my favorite nude looks. So the looks that I would wear on a daily basis that would take me 5 minutes to do, and that's exactly what I'm wearing today, and that's exactly what I'll be recreating at the end of this. And this is a one eyeshadow look using Toasted. So you can actually use just one eyeshadow, make it look quite good, I think. And this is sort of how I use makeup when I'm not filming or going out. So this is typical of what I use on a daily basis. But before we get on to the eye look, I do want to introduce the palette that I will be using in all of October. This is different to what I normally do. If you aren't familiar with this series, the reason I did it, or the reason I started it in January, was to sort of give myself a reason to use my palettes that I already own, and to stop me from wanting to buy more palettes, because I've got a big palette collection, and I thought this is a year where I want to give it more love and not be tempted to buy other palettes. So all the palettes that I have featured in this series are palettes that I am familiar with. I've had in my collection for years, and I just want to sort of re-review it and review it in a different way. Whereas this palette that I'm going to introduce for October, I've never actually used. This is one that I have received recently, and I got this gifted from Sigma. So this is the Warm Neutrals Volume 2, and I have never used this. The reason I'm targeting this now is because I want to use it. The colors inspire me. There's a little fly. So the colors inspire me, and I feel like these are the colors that I feel like reaching for at the moment. So if you can see here, these have never even been swatched, but I think this is sort of like a nice comprehensive palette to use on a daily basis. I really like this sort of army green color. I thought you've got warms, you've got pinks, you've got neutrals, you've got, yeah, greens, reds. So I thought this is a nice little palette. It sort of sums up the kind of colors that I want to use at the moment. And I thought this might be an interesting concept, reviewing a palette for the first time. If this formula is garbage, I'm going to be in for a bad month, but I thought this might be a bit fun. And I don't really plan these ahead of time which palettes I'm going to target, because I kind of go off what I feel at the time, what I feel like wearing, what I feel like reaching for every day. There's no point, you know, reaching for a colorful palette if you actually don't want to wear it. And there's no point wearing a really nude palette if you want to reach for colored stuff. So I sort of wanted to pick this one because it suits sort of the colors that I want to reach for right now. But I definitely, by the end of the year, I know a lot of people wanted me to do the Huda Desert Dusk palette, and I will do that. And that will either be after this or in December, because I'm really wanting to do that one. And that's kind of like a fun sort of holiday. You can got the duochromes and whatnot. So I will definitely do that palette. But I kind of want to do this one first. So we'll see how we go with a brand new palette that I've never used. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed that. I know it was a pretty simple one, but it was a pretty simple palette. So yeah, there's nothing too exciting in the looks that I created, unfortunately. But keep watching if you want to see me do this very quick eye look. So for this look, I am just using this one shade. That's all I'm using. If you were trying to be really quick, you could not apply a primer. This does actually work without a primer. But because I want it to last sort of throughout the day, I'm going to put a primer on. I'm just putting on the Bare Minerals Gen Nude. This is in the shade Lit. So that's that. And I am just blending it with my fingers. So just with a flat brush, I'm getting toasted and I'm loading it up quite a lot and just sort of patting it on. So just patting and sort of blending as I go, just into the crease. It's just, this shade, like, I do find it looks best if you sort of pack it on, because otherwise it can look really sort of subtle. And if that's what you want as well, then, you know, that's great. You can do that. But I personally like this color. I think it looks more effective if you sort of pack it on. But it's very easy to pack on. I'm also, so that's just really rough. And I'm also taking that on the lower lash line. The good thing about this brush, since it is quite thin, you can sort of do that quite easily. So that's on, and then with a fluffy brush, I am just taking a bit. And what is good about this sort of shade is that it is shimmery, and people say, you know, you shouldn't use shimmer in the crease. I actually beg to differ. I think often shimmery shades, especially nude shades, can look really pretty in the crease, and it can add a lot of depth, because once it catches a light, it sort of looks like you're using different colors, where in reality, you're just using one color. So yeah, you know, these aren't super shimmery or aren't super glittery, so I find that if you just blend it out, it can just look more like a satin in the crease, and I think it's a really pretty and very quick look. So that's literally it. Blend that out a little bit. That's the eyes done. So yeah, I think it blends quite well. It doesn't look like I've just got shimmer bombs on my eyelids. I think it's a really pretty color. And what I'll do now is just curl my lashes and do some mascara. So I don't always curl my lashes. This is just the Shiramura one. But I find that when I do have very nude eyeshadows, I do think it makes the mascara sort of stand out a bit better. So I do think it is worthwhile doing. If I'm wearing like winged liner, I don't really see much of a difference, but when I'm not wearing liner, I do think it's worthwhile. I'm also using Burgundy mascara. So this is by L'Oreal. It's the Voluminous Originals, and this is in the shade Burgundy. Oh, you can't even see, but it's a shade Burgundy. This is a really beautiful color. It's like a warm burgundy color, but on the lashes, you can't really see it a lot. So I find that this to be a very like separating and sort of defining mascara, but it doesn't add a lot of volume, and it doesn't add as much length as I would like either. But on a daily basis, I think this is a really cool color and a really cool formula. So if you're just going sort of very natural, this adds some definition, and you can see it definitely does separate. It doesn't build, but lengthens a bit and then separates a lot. And you could leave it there. I do like to have a little bit of mascara on my lower lashes, but I'm just going to put just a touch. Just a touch. Usually I put quite a lot, but I think this look kind of looks really pretty with just like mainly the top lashes being the main focus. So that's a really typical example of what I would wear just on a daily basis if I'm going out on the weekend, just going to the shops or catching up with friends or seeing family, and I want some really quick makeup, sort of one color eyeshadow that I can use all over the lid, and then also just a bit of mascara. But it is kind of fun having a pop of sort of burgundy. You can't see it too much, but I think you can definitely see it a lot more on a very nude eye. So if you have really competing eyeshadows, you're less inclined to see the burgundy. I think the burgundy is a little bit more soft compared to a black, and yeah, I think it looks pretty. So that's kind of what I would wear.